The night my daughter stopped breathing, I knew something was terribly wrong. But it wasn't a medical condition. It wasn't something doctors could explain. Her eyes rolled back, her body convulsed, and when she finally opened her mouth, the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was deeper, older, filled with a hatred that froze my blood. My wife screamed. I stood paralyzed. Our home had become a nightmare, and we had no idea how we got here. For weeks, strange things had been happening. Doors slamming in empty rooms, shadows moving against the light, a smell like rotting flesh that appeared and disappeared without source. We thought we were losing our minds. We called doctors, therapists, even pest control. Nothing helped. Then my daughter's condition worsened. She stopped eating, stopped speaking. At night we heard her talking to something we couldn't see. That's when my wife found the card tucked in our mailbox. No envelope, just a name and a phone number, Father Thomas Whitmore. Below it, 3 words written in shaky handwriting, he can help. We had no idea that calling that number would reveal a darkness in our home that had been waiting for generations to claim us. The first time I spoke to Father Whitmore on the phone, I felt ridiculous. I'm a software engineer. My wife's a teacher. We're rational people. The idea of calling a priest about our daughter felt like admitting defeat to superstition, but his voice carried something I desperately needed. Calm, authority. He didn't laugh when I described what was happening. He didn't suggest therapy or medication. Instead, he asked me a single question that made my skin crawl. Has anything changed in your home recently? Any new objects? Any renovations? My mind immediately went to the basement. 3 months earlier, we'd decided to renovate the space, turn it into a home of vice. During demolition, the contractors found a sealed crawl space behind the old foundation wall. Inside was a collection of items that made no sense. Old photographs of people we didn't recognize, handwritten letters in a language none of us could read, and a wooden box, ornately carved, locked with a rusted iron clasp. The contractors wanted to throw it all away, but something compelled me to keep the box. It was beautiful in a strange, unsettling way. I put it on a shelf in my office and forgot about it, until Father Whitmore asked his question. The priest arrived the next evening. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes that had seen too much. He carried a worn leather bag and wore his clerical collar with a quiet dignity that immediately commanded respect. My daughter was upstairs, sedated by prescription medication that barely kept her calm. Father Whitmore asked to see the box first. When I showed him, his expression darkened. He set down his bag and examined the carvings without touching it. The designs were intricate, almost hypnotic, spirals and symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. "This is a binding box," he said quietly. "It's used in certain rituals to contain something, or someone." I laughed nervously. This couldn't be real, but Father Whitmore's expression silenced me. He explained that throughout history, people have tried to trap malevolent entities, to lock away evil using sacred objects, prayers, and specific materials. This box was one such container, and we had broken the seal. The entity inside had been released into our home, and it had chosen my daughter as its vessel. Father Whitmore asked to see my daughter. Upstairs, my wife sat beside our little girl's bed, holding her small hand. At 8 years old, Emma had always been vibrant, full of laughter. Now she looked hollow. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Her breathing was shallow. Dark circles ringed her eyes. The priest approached slowly, speaking softly. Emma's eyes opened, but they weren't her eyes anymore. They were black, completely black, like staring into empty wells. When she saw Father Whitmore, her face twisted into something that wasn't a smile. It was a mockery of one. "You," the voice that wasn't Emma's said, "We remember you, priest. You failed before. You'll fail again." My wife sobbed. I felt my legs weaken, but Father Whitmore remained steady. He opened his bag and began removing items. A Bible, worn from years of use, a silver crucifix, small bottles containing water and oil, rosary beads that looked ancient. He asked us to leave the room. My wife refused. She wouldn't leave our daughter. I stayed too. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. What followed was the longest night of my life. Father Whitmore began with prayers, ancient words in Latin that filled the room with a strange heaviness. At first, nothing happened. Then Emma began to laugh. Not her innocent, childish laugh, but something cruel and mocking. The temperature dropped. Our breath became visible in the cold air. The priest continued, his voice growing stronger. He sprinkled blessed water. Emma's body jerked violently, straining against invisible bonds. The voice coming from her mouth changed, multiplied, as if several entities were speaking at once. They screamed obscenities. They revealed intimate details about our lives, secrets we'd never told anyone. They knew about my father's death, about my wife's miscarriage before Emma was born, about every fear and shame we carried. Fage. There, Whitmore explained later, this was a tactic meant to shake our faith, to make us doubt. He pressed the crucifix against Emma's forehead. Her skin sizzled as if burned, though the metal wasn't hot. The smell of sulfur filled the room. My daughter's body began to levitate, rising inches off the bed. My wife screamed. I thought I was losing my mind. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. But Father Whitmore showed no fear. He raised his voice, commanding the entity to reveal its name. In demonology, knowing a demon's true name gives power over it. The entities fought back. Objects in the room began to shake. The mirror on Emma's dresser cracked straight down the middle. Scratching sounds came from inside the walls. The priest held firm, repeating his command with absolute authority. Finally, Emma's body went rigid. The voice changed again, deeper than before, resonating with a power that made the windows rattle. It spoke a name in a language I didn't recognize, but the sound of it felt like claws scraping inside my skull. Father Whitmore nodded grimly. He knew this entity. Years ago, he'd encountered it before in another family. That family hadn't been as fortunate. The demon had claimed 2 lives before the priest could stop it. This time would be different, he promised, but the battle had only begun. The exorcism lasted 3 days. Father Whitmore barely slept, sustained by faith and determination. He called in assistance from another priest, Father Rodriguez, a specialist in spiritual warfare. Together they worked in shifts, maintaining constant prayer over Emma. The entity fought with everything it had. On the second day, Emma's body showed physical signs of the possession. Scratches appeared on her arms, forming words and symbols. She spoke in languages neither priest recognized. She contorted her body in ways that should have broken bones. My wife and I were allowed only brief visits, and each time we saw our daughter, she looked less like herself. The demon was consuming her from within. Father Whitmore warned us that without intervention, Emma would die. Her body couldn't sustain this invasion much longer. They needed to force the entity out completely, which required one final dangerous ritual. On the third night, both priests prepared for what Father Whitmore called the separation. This was the most critical moment. They would call upon sacred authority to sever the demon's connection to Emma and cast it back to where it came from. But the process was risky. If done incorrectly, it could kill my daughter or trap her soul alongside the demon. My wife and I were asked to participate. We would stand as representatives of Emma's family line, claiming authority over our bloodline and denying the entity any right to our daughter. Father Whitmore drew symbols on the floor with blessed salt, creating a protective circle. We took our positions. Emma was brought to the center, held by both priests. She was barely conscious now, her body weak from days of torment. The ritual began at midnight. The priests chanted in unison, their voices rising and falling in ancient rhythms. My wife and I held hands, adding our voices with simple prayers, the only ones we knew. The air grew thick, hard to breathe. The candles flickering around the circle blazed brighter, their flames turning blue. Emma's body began to shake violently. The demon screamed through her mouth, a sound so terrible it seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. Father Whitmore commanded the entity to release its hold. He called upon divine authority, speaking with such absolute conviction that I felt the power of his words in my chest. The demon resisted, clinging to Emma with desperate fury. It threatened us, promised horrible deaths, described in detail how it would torture our souls. But the priests didn't waver. They pressed forward, their faith unshakable. Then Father Rodriguez did something unexpected. He picked up the wooden box we'd found in the basement and placed it in the circle. He explained quickly that the demon hadn't been trapped in the box originally by accident. It had been bound there by someone in our family's history, someone who had made a terrible mistake in summoning it. The box carried a blood connection to our lineage. By using it as a focal point, they could pull the demon away from Emma and back into its prison. Father Whitmore anointed the box with holy oil and began a binding prayer. The demon's screams intensified. Emma's body arched backward at an impossible angle. Black smoke began to pour from her mouth, thick and viscous like oil. It swirled in the air, resisting, fighting to stay. The priests pushed harder, their voices reaching a crescendo. Suddenly, the smoke rushed toward the box, pulled by an invisible force. It fought every inch, but the binding was too strong. The wooden container seemed to inhale the darkness, drawing it in like a vacuum. Emma collapsed. The candles went out simultaneously, plunging us into darkness. For a long moment, there was absolute silence. Then we heard it. A small, weak voice. "Mommy?" It was Emma. Really Emma. My wife lunged forward, gathering our daughter into her arms. I joined them, tears streaming down my face. Father Whitmore and Father Rodriguez were exhausted but smiling. They had done it. The demon was sealed away once more, but the box posed a problem. It couldn't be destroyed, Father Whitmore explained. Destroying it would release the entity again. Instead, it needed to be taken to a secure location, a place where the church kept such dangerous objects under constant spiritual guard. He would personally ensure it never threatened another family. The aftermath was difficult. Emma remembered nothing of the possession, which Father Whitmore said was a blessing. She recovered slowly, regaining her strength and personality over several weeks. But my wife and I were changed forever. We'd seen something that shattered our understanding of reality. We learned that Father Whitmore had devoted his life to this work after his own sister had been possessed as a teenager. He'd been unable to save her. She died during an exorcism that went wrong. That tragedy had driven him to become a priest and dedicate himself to spiritual warfare, so no other family would lose someone they loved. He'd spent years studying, training, learning from the most experienced exorcists in the world. The case with Emma, he admitted, had been one of the most difficult he'd ever encountered. The demon had been ancient, powerful, and deeply rooted in our family's history. Through research, he discovered that my great-great-grandfather had been involved in occult practices in the late 1800s. He'd attempted to summon a demon to gain wealth and power. The ritual had gone wrong, and instead of controlling the entity, he'd barely managed to trap it in the binding box. For over a century, it had waited in that sealed crawl space, dormant but patient. When we broke the seal, we'd unknowingly fulfilled the final condition for its release. 5 years have passed since that nightmare. Emma is 13 now, a happy teenager who loves art and soccer. She has no memory of what happened, and we've decided never to tell her. Some burdens are too heavy for a child to carry, but my wife and I carry those memories every day. We see the world differently now. We understand that evil is real, tangible, and far more dangerous than we'd ever imagined. But we also learned that good is real too. Faith, courage, and selflessness are not abstract concepts. They're weapons against darkness. Father Whitmore became more than just the priest who saved our daughter. He became a friend, a spiritual guide who helped us rebuild our faith. We'd been casual believers before, attending church occasionally, treating religion as tradition rather than truth. Now we understand the power of faith, not as blind belief, but as a shield against forces that seek to destroy us. We've also learned about the hidden war being fought every day by people like Father Whitmore and Father Rodriguez. They don't seek fame or recognition. They work in shadows, protecting families from threats most people refuse to believe exist. The Catholic Church, despite its flaws and failures, maintains a network of trained exorcists who respond to cases around the world. These priests face genuine evil regularly, risking their lives and sanity to help others. Father Whitmore told us there are more cases now than ever before. He believes that as society turns away from spiritual awareness, people become more vulnerable to these entities. Dabbling in occult practices, using Ouija boards as games, exploring abandoned places where dark rituals occurred. These actions open doors that should remain closed. Our story could have ended in tragedy. Without Father Whitmore's intervention, we would have lost Emma. The demon would have consumed her, and likely would have moved on to the rest of us. Instead, we survived, and we're stronger for it. We've since moved to a different house. We couldn't stay in that place after everything that happened, but we didn't run away from our faith. We embraced it. We attend church regularly now, not out of obligation, but gratitude. We volunteer, we help others, and we share our story when appropriate, hoping to warn people about the dangers of treating evil as entertainment or myth. Emma is thriving, completely unaware of the darkness that tried to claim her. Sometimes I watch her laughing with friends or focused on her artwork, and I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. We were given a second chance. A priest we'd never met risked everything to save our family from pure evil. Father Thomas Whitmore will always be our hero, our reminder that even in the darkest moments, there are those who stand against the darkness. And sometimes, if we're in Dibly fortunate, they arrive just in time to pull us back from the edge of hell itself. Our family survived because one man refused to let evil win. For that, we will be forever grateful.